Why, yes, it is showtime. It is 9 p.m. Eastern here in the United States on a Monday. So that means it is time for Unfound Live. I hope everybody is doing well out there. Everybody had a great week since we last got together. I have a fantastic show lined up for you tonight. Things going on in the news. I had a suggestion from last week that I remembered for a change. Somebody wanted me to take a look at a disappearance, and I think I felt motivated because it happened in the town where my best friend, his son, goes to college there, so that maybe could be the reason that it stuck in my mind. So I'm going to take a look at that, but I also have picked out a disappearance just randomly, one that caught my eye that I've read about before that hasn't been featured on the podcast. So that's what we're going to do with Kelly Dae Wilson, a woman who disappeared from Texas in 1992. And I think if you're really, really, really up on Unfound's disappearances, you're going to see a similarity to one in particular that we've already featured. I want to talk about this woman, a dentist who went missing. She's now been found. I was fully prepared to talk about her disappearance without her being found, but she has been located, and there does seem to be some drama surrounding that. So I'm going to take a look at what I think happened there. I finished the book 2020 Vision, a paperback sci-fi, not a very long book that I was told, I think right here, maybe in the live show form, maybe 3 weeks ago, maybe a month ago, when I discussed the disappearance of Ray Gricar. I think somebody had told me that there's a book out there somehow connected or had seemed like his disappearance. Well, I've read that book, and now I am ready to report on it and give you my book report. However, I'm not going to ruin it for anybody. This isn't going to be a spoiler review. It's actually is regarding the plot and the ending and all of that. I'm just going to give you my overall review of the writing of it and whether it had anything to do with, does it have any similarity to Ray's disappearance? That's what I'm going to get into. I guess I'll do a general idea of what we might do, a book review, a non-spoiler book review on it as well. But I'm not going to ruin anything in it if you would like to read it yourself. However, not to give too much foreshadowing. But after I tell you what I thought about it, you're probably not going to want to. But maybe. I got it off of Amazon for $4 or $5. Surely you can spare that if you want. So those are the 3 items that I'm guaranteed to get to. But I also, like I said, I am going to get to this disappearance that was suggested to me last week. It is on the agenda as well. As you are watching and listening tonight, what should be on your agenda is, first of all, giving this show a thumbs up. You know what to do. Thumbs up. Don't forget. Just do it now. If you're watching on Facebook, you can do that. Give a little heart or something over there as well. For anybody watching over there who isn't on YouTube. You can support Unfound through a variety of ways. Patreon.com/Unfound Podcast. PayPal.me/Unfound Podcast. You can contribute through the Super Chat button over there in the comments section while the show is going on. And I know recently somebody gifted some subscriptions to this channel to other people, which I really, really appreciate. And then also you can hit the join button below. You get some things that other people do not. So who is in here? Let's just go and see who is in here. First of all, everything good to see you. Fishing, Amy. Hello, Lisa. I saw your Chiefs won this weekend. D, how are you? Mary Jane, happy Monday to you. Paula, great to see you. Stephanie. Everybody, thank you for making time. Derek, good to see you. And I was just saying, Derek, I think it was you who gave me the suggestion last week for the disappearance of James Roberts, correct? Am I correct, Derek? I did remember that, and I will be discussing that tonight, even though it is not in the title of the show tonight. I fully intend to take a look at that. Actually, I'll be taking, I guess, a look at two different disappearances that Unfound is not yet covered, and just doing my best to analyze what might have gone on. James Roberts, yeah, the family called him Martin. Okay. James Roberts. Yep, I got it, James. He called him Martin. All right, I will try to remember that, Derek, when I am going through his disappearance. If I mess it up, please forgive me. Yes, the family called him Martin. Yes, James Martin Roberts. Good to be talking about him tonight, Derek. Hello, Darlene. Hey, it's been a long time since I've caught a live. Well, good to see you, Darlene, with a Y. Good to see you. I worked with a Darlene for a few years in my stage managing career back in Las Vegas. So there you go. All right, what is going on with me since we all got together? This was really something. On Saturday, I went over to my brother's. He and his wife were back from their trip, and they were over there in Polk City at their new place. And one day last week, my brother had told me that there's going to be a big car show in Lakeland, which is very near where he lives now. Said, sure, let's check it out. Didn't really have a ton of things going on Saturday. I thought that I could get over there and then come back and get some work done on Saturday evening, Saturday night, and that's exactly what happened. But I've been to a lot of car shows in my life. I've been to quite a few car auctions, and this was probably the biggest car show that I have ever attended. That's really, really, really saying something. I did not fully expect that. I, of course, expected something good, but I could not have fully understood how many cars were going to be there until I showed up. And so there was a lot of walking to be done all around. There's like this little lake. All these cars were lined up around this lake. And then in downtown Lakeland for a few blocks, there were cars, parked up against the curb. Just a ton, several, how many tons of vehicles. There were actually 8 DeLoreans there, all lined up. You know, the car from, if you don't know, the car from Back to the Future, the one that Doc turned into a time machine. There were 8 of them there, all lined up together. 8 of them. Those are rare, pretty rare cars these days. I've seen them before. I've seen them out on the roads, but maybe at the most I've seen maybe 2 or 3 at one time. I think there. Did I count them? I thought I came up with 8 of them at this car show. There were several McLarens, which are like these super, super duper fast vehicles, McLarens. There were several of those there. I can't even begin to tell you. Of course, there were a lot of Mustangs there, but a lot of like newer ones, like 2000, maybe over the last 20 years, many from that area. And once again, going back. And then my favorite car of all time is something called a Ford GT. They only made it for 2 years, I think 2006, 2007. It's kind of a reimagining of the Ford GT40 that won Le Mans back in the 1960s, but it's legal for street use. When they were new 20 years ago, I forget how much they were, but those are like $350,000 cars or something, and they're a Ford. But those are my favorite car of all time. And there were several of those there too, including one of the ones they used as a test car that never got sold. It didn't, barely even looks like a car, that they used like on a test track to make sure some of the things that they were designing would work. That car was there as well. It was crazy. Old Cadillacs all lined up together. There were 3 Aston Martins there, one of them being one of the old ones, like going back to the James Bond gold finger era. One of those, I think it was called a DB6 or something. But then there was a DB9 from around 2009, convertible, which was really, 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 really nice. And there was, I think, an almost new Aston Martin there as well. There was a Rolls-Royce Cullinan, which is like the SUV version of a Rolls-Royce. Stickers at like $350,000. Amazing. There was a new Bentley there, like a 2-door sport car Bentley there. All sorts of like trucks, Corvettes. I was outside long enough today, walking by all these cars. You can maybe even tell that I got a little bit of sun. I'm not as pale as usual. And, it was not that hot out, but it was sunny, and you could tell I did get some sun. I didn't wear a hat. My brother wore a hat. I did not. That was not smart. But it was a good time, and we must have spent, 3 hours there just walking around, my brother and I. So it was a really, really good time. My brother and I, we really like going. And if you might remember, the last several years, we've gone to the Mecum auction, which they play on TV sometimes over in Kissimmee, Florida. We go over there and check out all the cars that are going to go over the auction block over there. We always have a great time doing that. And I'm sure we'll be doing that in January again. But I'm so glad that he told me about that. And because I didn't know anything about it, but he did. And so it was a really, really good time. And, the money that some people must have. Because as you would imagine, a lot of these cars, not cheap. But I think for the most part, they were all privately owned. And it's crazy. It was crazy. And in fact, just to give you an idea, it was the show where it was only a couple blocks from where I've spoken at Florida Southern College a couple times over there in Lakeland. So there's that. But so that was a good time on Saturday. And then we went back to his place, got something to eat, got something to drink. We didn't even sit inside. We sat outside, like in this carport area where their big RV is. And they actually have a TV on the outside of their RV, on like the side of it. And so we just sat outside and watched TV off the TV that's on the outside of the RV. So that was kind of neat. And so I then spent a couple hours there. And then I came home and got some work done, Unfound work done on Saturday night. But that was a pretty good day, Saturday. And I should only be so fortunate one of these days to own any one of those cars there. But for the time being, I guess I'm stuck with my 130,000 mile Hyundai Sonata, which has only let me down once. So that's what I did. What else is going on since we got together? Work continues. There is no sleeping in this building during the week. These construction guys, they're working on the balconies in this building. 8:30 sharp, man. The pounding, the grinding, and everything starts. There is no sleeping in during the week. So there's that. And I think what I've been told is next week they start on the balconies for my column of condos. So going the whole way up to the 20th floor, they'll start on the top and work their way down. So within a couple weeks, they'll be working on this balcony right up here, right out here, what they're doing and how they're changing it and everything else, it's still fairly unclear to me. But so that's what's been going on here. And then also, as far as trivia goes, I've joined a new team. And I would say that we are a work in progress. We didn't have a bad night last Wednesday, but this team that I'm now on doesn't quite have, at this point, doesn't quite have the horsepower of the team that I've played with for several years. And that's fine. I like a challenge. It's some new people I'm playing with until... it's like three different groups of people that I've played with trivia now over like the past year. And this is like the newest group. And like I said, I think we're going to get it together. I think we've done okay so far. The problem is we haven't answered the final question correct yet, but we haven't taken any zeros yet either. So we're fairly competitive because of that. But at some point, we do need to start getting some of these final questions correct. But just don't quite have the horsepower of the previous team that I was on. And I haven't been playing on Saturdays because that group is kind of taking a little time off right now. I think I'll be getting back together with them maybe when November starts again. So the team that I'm playing with now over at Finley's, I think we're in 8th place. Of course, the old team, we were in like 1st and 2nd place all the time. Right now we're in 8th place, but actually that's not too bad of a place to be right now, considering. Am I helping them? I think I am. I think I've certainly added something, and we got some questions right this previous Wednesday that had I not been there, I don't think they would have gotten them. So I'm doing my part. And hopefully some things will go our way. But really, that's been about it. Doing my singing practice. I'm working on some things there. Did it today. And D says, Ed, your internet is being funky. I don't know what to tell you about that, D. I don't know why. Is anybody else having any issues out there? Please tell me if the internet is funky where you are. I think you meant funky, D, not exactly what you read, what you wrote in there. I'm gonna take that word out of there. Don't take it personally, D, but I think you meant funky, but you wrote something else instead. So let me know once again if there's any issues, audio, video, probably out of my control, but I need to know about these things. So let's get right into it. I do have a lot of analysis and stories. A lot has gone on. If we have time, I also want to talk about this heist that took place at the Louvre a couple days ago, where some crown jewels got stolen. Let's see if I can get to that. But of course, I'm going to first go to Derek's suggestion from last week that he and I just discussed a couple minutes ago. And that would be the disappearance of James Martin Roberts. As I think Derek said, he went by Martin. Let's just see what everybody is saying here. Derek says Martin could still be alive like Trevor Nichols. I'll get into that, Derek, surely. Hello, Jojo. What's going on with you? Good to see you tonight. Lisa, oops. I went to a place near Orlando that restores DeLoreans. It was very cool. That would be pretty cool, especially since they're stainless steel, Lisa. Lisa, internet seems fine here, but I don't have my reading glasses handy. Okay. It's fine now. Once again, anybody, if you've seen any issues, let me know. So this is the disappearance that Derek suggested to me last week. James Martin Roberts, a young man who went missing from Boone, North Carolina in April of 2016. And Boone, North Carolina is where Appalachian State University is. And that is where my best friend Doug's son goes to school. I've never been to Boone, North Carolina, but it's in my mind now because of where his son goes to school. So let me read part of what it says at the Charlie Project, and then I will get into some analysis, and then we'll move on to the other disappearance tonight, Kelly Dae Wilson, which is one I picked out myself. James Martin Roberts was last seen walking away from the Apple Cart bus stop at the corner of River Street and Blowing Rock Road in Boone, North Carolina on April 21st, 2016. So this disappearance is about 9.5 years old. Near the Holmes Convocation Center at Appalachian State University. There you go. He has never been heard from again. He is from Kernersville, North Carolina, and was living in Boone and attending Caldwell Community College and Technical Institute at the time of his disappearance. The last phone conversation he had with his father was normal, and Robert said that talk tomorrow, but he never called and didn't reply to his father's text messages. Several days later, Robert's father became concerned and contacted his son's landlord, who spoke to his roommates, who checked Robert's room. He wasn't there and had left behind a cellular phone and other electronic devices, as well as a note. The note was vague, but said Roberts was leaving because he had not taken advantage of opportunities he had, and he was disappointed in himself. The note did not specifically mention that he planned to harm himself, and his father did not interpret it as a suicide note. Extensive searches of the area turned up no evidence as to his whereabouts. All right, so, and then it goes on to talk a little bit more about him, but I think that we have a pretty good understanding of his disappearance just with those paragraphs. When you have a note like this, I don't know what, I have to admit, I don't have a good idea about public perception regarding notes and disappearances. We've certainly had a few. Patrick Beavers, going way back to like the first or second year of Unfound, he left a note. Much more recently, let me see here. Who was it? It was, let's see if I can pick her name out. It wasn't really that long ago. Wasn't her. Oh, let me see if I can find who it is. Was it Melinda Lopez, maybe? That left a note. Jaden Carpenter, somewhere in, like I said, about a year ago or more than a year ago, she left a note. Remember, she talked about it was a note that was found in a book that had been written that day. Wasn't found till days later. Maybe that's ringing a bell for some of you. So we do have some experience in this area, but I don't know if we've actually had a note out and outright said, I'm going to kill myself. This is a suicide note. Give my stuff to whoever. I don't think so. Very well could be wrong, but it's just not something that really jumps into my head at this moment, even though I think that we have had some disappearances that I think were suicides. In fact, we did have one. We know Devin Bond, very sad. But I don't think he left a note. But certainly there are others that could have been out and out suicides, whether jumping off a cliff or jumping into the water, jumping off a bridge or something like that. Certainly we've had some of those, but no notes. So when I start to look at Martin's disappearance and his note, you could say that he sounds depressed, but I think on the other hand, there are a lot of people who maybe have who have been like this and then did commit suicide. And then there are others who haven't committed suicide. So it's just hard for me to say. Instead, what I would say is I think we all want to understand that, the note was vague, but said Roberts was leaving because he had not taken advantage. Of course, I would like to see the note and actually see what words. This is just a summation or summary of what he said that Megan has up on her site. I don't think there's a picture of the note left there or anything, so we can read it for ourselves to really look at the actual words that Martin picked out. And I do think that that's important, by the way. Certainly important. But if I'm perfectly willing to accept if it doesn't say that he was going to commit suicide here, I'm perfectly willing to believe that that was not it. I don't think anybody's lying about that. But it does seem, though, a little drastic when you say he's leaving because he had not taken advantage of opportunities he had and he was disappointed in himself. I think we've all been disappointed in ourselves at a variety of times in our life. In fact, maybe many people are disappointed with themselves for whatever they're doing right now. And they don't commit suicide. They don't do anything drastic. They don't drop out of school. They don't leave their marriage. They on and on and on and on and on. So to walk off because of this seems drastic. Now, does this actually mean that he committed suicide? Well, the tough part here is that and I started thinking, have any of you ever seen the movie And Justice for All with Al Pacino? I know it's a weird tangent that I'm going to go off on. But in that movie, there is a judge who is losing his mind, and he would fly this helicopter, and every day or however when he would go out, he would always put the same amount of gas in it, but every day he'd just go a little farther out into like the bay or the ocean or whatever it was, and then come back. Just going a little further every day, even though he would leave the same amount of gas. Well, of course, at some point, you're going to come really, really close to running out of gas. And I haven't seen the movie for so long. That might have actually been what happened in the movie. The guy was just kind of like losing his mind. This is kind of the thing that I think about in situations like this. The person doesn't necessarily have a plan to commit suicide, meaning I have a knife, I have a gun, I have a rope, I'm going to find a tree, nothing like that. Instead, and I think this, when it comes to people who go missing during hiking, I think this happens more than we realize. Like you've heard me talk about, of course, you know that I keep track of like plane crashes in the United States. It's something that that always interests me for whatever reason. You see a lot of these little propeller planes that crash, how many times it happens. I have convinced myself that many of those are suicides. And people, mostly men, do that because it looks like an accident, and so their loved ones will still get the life insurance. I believe that. I'm absolutely convinced that that happens, especially when you start looking at the circumstances and it's clear weather and the person has his license and he's never had any issues. And then all of a sudden he stalls a plane out and goes right into, straight down into the ground, and it's really hard to explain. Did the person have a heart attack? Who knows? This is kind of how I think about maybe disappearance like this, that he walked off and he was going to walk off into the woods and he was just going to keep walking to the point where he couldn't get back to civilization in time to not die. This is why I brought in the And Justice for All. You fly so far out into the ocean, you've gone past your halfway point. So if you turn around, you already know you're not going to make it back to land because you're going to run out of gas. And there's nothing that's going to be able to change that. I've convinced myself when I look at a disappearance like that, we have to be open to this. So it's not a suicide in that there is a plan with a weapon or anything. It's just, I'm going to put myself in a position in which I can't get out of it. Walking off without a jacket, swimming out into the ocean and swimming so far from shore that I'm so tired that I can't get back to shore. Things like that. Those are, I guess, suicides, even though I'm not sure how many people really think about that kind of suicide or the killing of oneself. We don't think things that are more abrupt, more planned, more obvious. And this maybe is not something that really pops into people's minds, but I think that this happens way more than people realize. So this is where my mind goes for Martin's disappearance. Now, well, then why didn't he write suicide? Well, it very well may be that people who do this and maybe don't write notes or write notes that don't have the S word in it, the S word being suicide, is because they're really not sure that it's going to work. They're really not sure that when the time comes that they're going to have the courage to do what they're going to do. So they don't want to put it in writing, because if they don't do it, well, then it makes them feel like, like they're cowards or something. Of course, we're all happy that they do it, and their family and friends are all happy that it didn't happen. But I'm not sure that the person who wrote that note feels that way. So you leave it vague. You don't write it right out. And if this is what happened with Martin, if he didn't go missing, and if he didn't say it was suicide, if he does appear again and he's alive, and then they can just look at the note and he can just say, well, I was just feeling a little down for a while, but I'm okay now. He didn't say he was going to do anything rash. Just said he was feeling down. So he can kind of work his way out of it. But when you start writing things down like, I'm going to commit suicide, and then you don't do it, once again, it very well may be that is then what leads the person to try to commit suicide again and then actually succeed, because of, once again, the depression of not being able to do something that he said he was going to do. Now, let's see what everybody is saying here. Mark, are people allowed to ask you to cover cases, or do you just choose certain ones? Mark, you could, for the live show, it's sure. If you want to give me a suggestion for a disappearance you'd like me to talk about in the live show, yes. When it comes to the actual podcast that comes out of Friday, I don't mind suggestions, but just don't give me a list of ones you'd like to cover, because remember, I have to put work into trying to find contact numbers and phone numbers and email addresses and everything else. If you have suggestion, what makes it much more likely that we'll get featured on the podcast if you can provide contact information for the missing person's mother, father, somebody in the family, somebody like that. Whereas if you just send me a list of suggestions, that's going to be a little difficult for me, just to be honest. However, suggestions for me to just talk about off the top of my head like I'm doing tonight for Martin's disappearance, then you want to send me some suggestions, I'll certainly take them into consideration. Yeah, so for this, well, I can guarantee you, Mark, if you want me something for the actual podcast, then you're probably going to have to do a little work in providing me with an email or to a contact or a family member or something like that. At least get me some names of people who have done media appearances and things like that. Just being honest. So, but I guess in general, yes, I take suggestions. Technically, there's a lot of qualifications for that. Derek says Martin's behavior in the months prior to his disappearance was secretive. If I remember correctly, he was lying to different groups of friends about who he was hanging out with. Well, that's not a good sign, Derek. That would certainly make me inclined to believe that suicide is on the table. Now, Derek, you did bring up, does this sound like Trevor Nichols? Maybe, but I think now, of course, Trevor Nichols alive, back with his family. We're all happy about that. It's obvious to me Trevor didn't want to be married. He didn't want to be a father. He was getting transferred, which is and he was going to be going out even farther away from where his family was. with his wife, with his child, who I guess we could say we now know he didn't want to be with them. He's in the military. He's going from New York to Kansas and everything. A lot of stressors there. A lot of things going on in Trevor's life that seemingly were being thrust upon him, and he didn't want to deal with it anymore. That's my interpretation. I don't know what he's told his family since they got back in contact with him. I have no idea. And we also know that Trevor might have had some mental health issues going on here as well. That doesn't sound like this to me. It seems to me that Martin and Trevor Nichols were two different people. It seems to me that Trevor had a lot more going on in his life than Martin did. It seems to me that Trevor might have just made a lot of choices that he couldn't back out of now without getting in some trouble. And he eventually did spend some time in being that he went AWOL and deserted. He had to do some time for that. I just, the way I understand Martin's disappearance, it just seems to be a little different. It seems like Martin had less going on in his life. And it seemed he did do well in school and things. So, but it very well could be a mental health issue. And in that, then yes, I guess that it would be similar to Trevor's in that particular way. Now, if you're asking me, if you're saying, well, is it possible he could still be alive? Sure. Martin could still be alive. The thing is, actually, I think this does seem to be similar to Patrick Beaver's disappearance. Once again, going way back to 2017, I think it might have been featured on Unfound. It's a long time ago now. And he left a note, and he just simply said, "You know what? I'm out of here." This kind of sounds like what Martin did, and I really don't know how many people who think that Patrick Beavers is still alive. So it's just tough. I think the stats would say, I think that Martin is deceased. That doesn't mean he is. Let's see what everybody is saying here. Okay, you're welcome, Mark. You're right. Good question. Thank you for asking. D, but I did send someone who is contact with a family friend. Yep. Once again, if it's contact information that can get me as close to the missing person who knew the missing person as possible, I'll take whoever it is. I don't care who it is. As long as they're credible. I can believe them. They're not the person who caused the disappearance. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a family member. It could be a friend, but it better be a really, really, really good friend. But let's see what else I have on my notes regarding Martin's. He didn't put suicide in it because he wasn't sure he'd do it. Or maybe he wasn't sure that he'd die. And I gave that and Justice for All example. I have here also that, there's nothing about this disappearance that seems outrageously odd to me, even if it's true what, Derek Way was secretive. Once again, Derek, this is one of those things where, of course, in a interview situation, this is something that I would need to flesh out for myself. Was it actually that he was actually behaving really secretively, or did people just think that after the fact, after he went missing, and it's kind of confirmation bias? This is something in my questioning that I would have to figure out for myself. I realize if you're saying that, I believe you. I'm not sure that necessarily it's true, though. It could be very, very subjective viewpoint from people who care about Martin. So it's just hard for me to tell under the current circumstances. It was secretive, not telling people. Well, maybe he was planning out his disappearance and he was going to move to California or something. Certainly possible. but I would like to hear what secretive actually means. And, Derek, as you know, as a person who I know has been following the podcast, one of those things I usually ask under disappearances like this one is a very important question to me is there anything you found out about the missing person after he went missing that you didn't know before he went missing? Was this person living some type of lie? Did the person say that his finances were great, but then it turns out he had zero in his bank account and he hadn't paid his rent for 4 months, on and on and on? Or, of course, sometimes people go in the sexuality disappearance, direction. That maybe one that comes to mind is Joshua Guimond, another college student who seemingly walked off, just like it seems Martin did. Of course, some people, including an entire podcast series, put forth the idea that Joshua Guimond was actually gay and he was covering it up, and this is what caused this disappearance. I think most of you know that I'm not really a big believer in that way. I really don't care about his sexuality one way or the other. I don't care about that. But there was nothing that's convincing to me that he was covering, quote unquote, covering up anything. So after the fact, it wasn't like, I realized that, what was it? They went onto his computer and there were a bunch of pictures of guys on it. You know what? There are a bunch of pictures of guys on my computers too. They're all the missing people, men who I've featured on Unfound. That doesn't mean anything. And once again, I don't care about Joshua's sexuality at all. So just like if there's a gay guy and he has a bunch of pictures of women on his computer, that doesn't mean he's secretly straight. So I don't know. Could Martin be alive? Just to kind of wrap this up, he could be. I do not think, though, that is, if you were betting on that in Las Vegas, I don't know if that would be the smart bet. It certainly could be true, but if you want to keep your money or increase your money or increase your odds of winning, probably him being deceased at this point is probably the safer bet. I'm perfectly willing to talk to his family about this. Love to get to know them and help them out, give them my insight. If they hear me talking about Martin tonight, I'd happily do that. I don't know how many media appearances they do, if they're still doing them all these years later. I'd certainly like to know more about who was the witness who saw him walk away. These are certainly things that could be fleshed out a little bit more. What was he planning to do that day? The questions I ask at this point. But with the information that's given right now, it doesn't seem to me to be an outrageously unique type of disappearance. Thus, I have to believe that the resolution to this is very much along the lines of other disappearances like it. And I think most of the time these people end up being deceased, whether it's just routing out suicide or, like I said, misadventure, going too far into the woods and not coming back, not being able to get back, or did they try to live on the streets for a while and couldn't do that, succumb to the elements? I think these are much more likely scenarios, very sadly. Hey, Charlie getting in a little late. That's okay. His cousin was the witness. Okay. Well, what did it's one of those things, Derek. Well, what did the cousin think that he was doing? Where did the cousin think that he was going? So he left a note and the cousin saw him walk away from the bus stop. Okay. This is just things that would need to flesh out a little bit more, Derek. But nothing right now is really jumping out at me as being very unusual. Now, if we were to find out, on the other hand, if this cousin has changed his story 10 times. And over the last 9 years, he has a history of violence and things like that. Then I guess anything's possible. And I don't know anything about that. So that's the best I think I can do with the information given. I think what it also continued to say, does not seem to me that anybody really suspects foul play for this disappearance all these years later. And that seems sensible to me. So there you go. By the way, if anybody's wondering, once again, this was the disappearance of James Martin Roberts. Derek suggested this to me last week. And he goes by the name Martin. And you can find his disappearance on the Charlie Project and on NamUs. So I'm wondering, I have to ask my buddy Doug if his son even knows about this disappearance. Probably not. This happened well before Doug's son started going to the college. All right. Thank you for that suggestion, though, from Derek. Derek from last week. I'm glad that I could remember it. Let's move on now to the one I picked out for tonight. And once again, as I'm talking tonight, please give the show a thumbs up tonight on Facebook or on YouTube. Give it the hearts and whatever else you can do over there on Facebook as it plays live on the page. And I think on my personal, on the Unfound page, and I think on my personal account as well. Please give it some hearts, some thumbs up. And then for all of you watching here on YouTube, do that as well. So I picked out Kelly Dae Wilson. Middle name Dae is her middle name. And that has to be really, really rare, I think. I've known about this disappearance for a while. I don't know why. Of course, I do a lot of missing persons reading. But this is one of those that I think that I've known about well before Unfound ever got started. And I think probably the reason it stayed in my head, as you will hear in the write-up, is because this young woman's tire was slashed. And in addition, she was supposed to be making a bank deposit that got made, but on the video, seemingly they can't tell if it was Kelly or not. I think those are the two elements of this disappearance that when I read it, probably stuck with me way back there in the attic of my brain. And then just recently, I looked this one up again to take another look at it just to get a feel for it. Because like I said, I don't think that I've looked at this disappearance since Unfound got started. And I can say with a lot of certainty that I don't think that I've ever tried contacting her friends or family. Maybe I can try to do that now. So, all right, I'll talk about Kelly Dae Wilson. Of course, you in the comment section, you can offer up your insights and questions as I go. Kelly was last seen at approximately 8:30 p.m. in Gilmer, Texas. And I think the other thing is, did we cover another disappearance in Gilmer, Texas? I think that's possible. On January 5th of 1992, I was in my junior year in college. She was leaving her place of employment, Northeast Texas Video, back when they had video stores, on Buffalo Street, and heading to the bank around the corner to make her usual night deposit. The bank's security cameras showed that an individual did make the night deposit, but it is unclear whether or not the person was Kelly. Very interesting, because those cameras, they're usually put in a spot where you can get somebody's face without any problem. Now, it was January. This Texas, it does get cold. Was it because their face was covered up with like a scarf or something? Maybe. But it doesn't exactly say why she couldn't be identified. Maybe somewhere out on the interwebs, it does say, was the person looking away from the camera? Did it look like the person was trying to avoid the camera? I don't know. Kelly's car was discovered what year? 1992, D. Kelly's car was discovered later in the evening in her employee's parking lot. So not later that evening, but that night. It's already 8:30 when she was seen on camera. So later that night. It was found in her employee's parking lot. One of the vehicle's tires had been slashed. The other 3 tires were okay. All of Kelly's personal belongings, including her purse, were inside the car, but her keys were missing. And my understanding, although it's not in the write-up on the Charlie Project, there was something out there that said the keys were eventually found somewhere in somebody's yard in Gilmer, but it's not in the write-up. So, but her purse was in the car, and I guess it was locked. A grand jury indicted. Now, this is where I think this is also another reason that this stuck with me because it's so crazy. A grand jury indicted Gilmore Police Department Sergeant James York Brown and 7 others on charges of Kelly's abduction and presumed murder in January 1994. So 2 years later, a grand jury indicted people men, in the police department for her disappearance. It's like Robin Abrams. But here's where it gets crazier. Prosecutors believed that Brown, who actually had been assigned to investigate Kelly's case, was involved with the 7 other individuals with kidnapping and imprisoning Kelly for over 1 week. The state also contended that they sexually assaulted and tortured Kelly while she was held captive, then stabbed her to death. It was alleged, I'm not making this up, it's right there, and I did check this just to be sure this is true. It was alleged that the police officers were part of a satanic cult, and I'm not making this up, and engaged in violent acts, including child molestation, as part of their cult rituals. Many of the defendants charged with Kelly's murder were also charged with sexually abusing children. The murder charges against everyone were later dropped 2 months after the initial allegations had been made. So 2 years and 2 months after she goes missing, all these charges are dropped. One suspect, a teenager named Michael Bibby, B-I-B-Y, was convicted of a misdemeanor for slashing Kelly's car tire. Remember, I talked about that. He admitted to the crime, but maintains he knows nothing about Kelly's disappearance and was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. I'm, of course, going to talk about that. The satanic cult was found to be non-existent, no kidding, a fantasy concocted by overzealous investigators. Brown and the other defendants maintained their innocence in Kelly's case from the onset of the investigation. Can you believe that? So you could see maybe there were a lot of reasons that this disappearance stuck in my head. The slashed tire, not being able to be seen on camera when she made, or whoever made the deposit. And then the police department itself, the actual person investigating the disappearance was charged with causing the disappearance. And then he and a bunch of others in the police department were charged with being in a satanic cult. And this is why they caused Kelly's disappearance. That is one wacky town they got over there in Gilmer, Texas, at least 33 years ago. Now, of course, I guess we have to view this through the lens of that time. And given that I'm 55, I remember this. The satanic cult thing in the 1980s was real. Even in my hometown of Leechburg, Pennsylvania, I can remember hearing stories about people seeing people, out in the woods somewhere doing this, doing that. Of course, as you would suspect, because I'm the same person I am now as back then as I am now, totally dismissed all of it. Totally dismissed all of it. I'm not saying there aren't people who worship Satan out there. They could do that. I really don't care one way or the other. But I'm not convinced that they are necessarily in the business of murdering people more than any other religious or non-religious group out there. Remember, there are a lot of Christians and Jews and Jews and Muslims and everybody else who have murdered a lot of people over the millennia. And, Satanists aren't alone. And there have been a lot of ritual killings through religious practices over the many centuries and thousands of years as well. I think that it was just it was time to pick on the Satanists, I think, is what I'm saying here. I don't believe any of that. Now, I'm not saying there haven't been some killers like Richard Ramirez, who worshiped the devil or whatever he did. He was a creepy guy and killed. We know that he eventually got caught, but killed women, stalking women in Southern California. But for every one of those types of people, you can pick out like 50 members of other religions who killed a lot of people too. So this is the way I look at it. But I do remember back at this time, this was a real thing. It was crazy. It was total mania, frenzy, just freaked out, kind of like going back to when Orson Welles did in the invasion, and everybody believed it back in the 1930s. It was on the radio talking about how this one town's getting invaded by Martians or whatever it was. And everybody believed it. It caused a total freak out of thousands of people. Of course, it wasn't true. This is kind of the same thing. But then investigators went in this direction for Kelly's disappearance. On one hand, it's crazy, but on the other hand, I'm not surprised. Although we might not get into necessarily the satanic cult side of it here in 2025. On the other hand, we do know of many, many, many missing persons investigations that have gone way off the rails. Many not having anything to do with cults necessarily, but how is the smiley face killer hoax any different? It's the same thing. And that was within the last 20 years, a bunch of investigators thinking that was true. No proof of it. Of course, as you know, I think it's all crap. But you start talking about that, it's amazing how much attention you'll get. And you'll get to go on all these TV shows, and you'll get to write a book, and you'll get to do a TV series. And look at you. Look at how popular you are. But you're not getting anything right. You're not resolving anything. And that's, of course, what happened back in the 1980s for all these investigations into satanic cults doing this and that. No proof of any of it. It's crazy. Like I said, pandemonium. It would be a word, I guess you could attach to this. So, as I have it right here, so it's really crazy, but still, even regarding this disappearance, I'd like to know how this cult rumor got started. I mean, I realized it was a thing at the time, but what even brought it about? I'm going to guess it was probably some prisoner. I'm going to guess it was probably somebody like that. I mean, by now how much I do not believe what people in jail say about disappearances. Zero. But I got to believe, could it have gotten started this way when the investigator that's looking into her disappearance isn't get investigated himself? This starts to sound to me like somebody who wanted revenge on the police. And who's going to want that? Probably somebody in jail. Just a guess. I have no idea. So but this entire disappearance needs to be looked at that way. None of the investigators knew anything of what to do. None of them. not the ones who were rumored to be in a satanic cult, and then the ones who were investigating them. None of these people knew anything about anything that they were doing, and so it shouldn't surprise us that this disappearance is unsolved 33 years later. I mean, if you're thinking a satanic cult did it, then no wonder it hasn't been solved. So what happened here? What's hard for me to determine is, did she come out of the store and the tire was slashed? Because I looked at a diagram. The bank is not like right next door. It's a little distance away. Could she have walked it? Yeah. It's January. It's going to be cold. Could she have done that? Maybe. Now, an idea that is out there is she might not have realized it. She could have come out to her car. The tire had already been slashed. She doesn't realize it, which I would not be surprised by that. It's dark. You know, who looks for that type of thing? She gets in her car. She starts driving it, maybe notices, man, something doesn't feel right. What's going on? But she decides to go over there, make the deposit anyway. Then she gets out. Oh, my car's tire slashed. But would she choose to drive back to where she was working? It seems unlikely. Now, we have to remember this is in the era before cell phones. And what's important to remember, as far as anybody knows, she didn't call anybody. She did not call anybody about this slashed tire. So we can't even be sure if she went missing before the slashed tire or after the slashed tire. It is certainly possible that somebody abducted her, however, and then this person did the bank deposit himself or herself, possible. And then somebody came along and slashed the tire. There's no facts that rule that out. Just want to make sure on that. Really tried to make sure on that. And if we're to believe this Michael Bibby guy did it, of course, he says that he admitted to it. But can we really believe anything in this disappearance? If we're going to have investigators thinking satanic cult did it, then I'm not willing to believe them on anything, especially charging anybody with anything, even when it comes to the slashing of this tire. Because I looked this Michael Bibby guy up, this kid up. He doesn't have a criminal record in all these years since. I looked him up. So is it possible that he could have just admitted to it because they put pressure on him, just like they put pressure on the investigators, put pressure on the prosecutor to bring charges of satanic cult against the actual disappearance investigator? I think that it's very possible. Very, very possible. So when it comes to the slashing of the tire, I'm not convinced that Michael Bibby did it. Somebody did it, but I'm not convinced that he did it, simply because this whole thing was so messed up. In addition, we can't be sure if the slashing of the tire has anything to do with their disappearance at all. You would think it would. I mean, what are the odds? And where I'm also going with this, and this is like a similarity, but a big difference. Some of you may be thinking about Sue Swedell. Remember that disappearance? Once again, going long, what was that, 1980s, where she was at work in Minnesota. On the way home, seemingly she discovered that her car was overheating. She pulls into a gas station. She gets out. She uses the phone. Somebody witnesses this. And then a guy alone, pulls up. The two talk. She leaves her car there. She gets in that car. She's never seen again. And what was found out later is her radiator in her car had been drained on purpose. Somebody had planned this. The difference, though, is Sue actually called home to tell her family what was going on. Kelly did not. So this is why I'm still under the impression of maybe the tire wasn't slashed until after she went missing, meaning this wasn't a setup. This wasn't somebody who slashed her car tire hoping that she would need help, and then this person could come along and help her. Maybe timing would absolutely have to be absolutely 100% perfect to do that. Somebody would have slashed the tire, sitting in the parking lot, waiting for her to come out. She comes out. The person pulls up, says, "Hey, there's something wrong with your tire." She doesn't even see it. Instead, this person sees it because, of course, this is the person that slashed the tire. And he says, "Well, I can give you a ride." It seems unlikely that she would do that. And of course, we have to remember the deposit got made, even though we don't know who did it. Would somebody really have abducted her and then gone and make her deposit? This would seem to then mean that whoever did this to her had a really, really, really good idea of what she did after work all night, which means she could have had a stalker. So maybe I'm talking myself into the idea that this is actually what happened. So, analysis. She didn't realize the tire was flat, and tried to drive the car. It's possible. I don't know how likely. As I've already said, this seems a lot like Sue Swedell, except that Sue had time to call someone. I think this is a big difference. We have to remember, flat tire, but Kelly didn't call anyone. So did she not realize it? Did she not have time? It's not clear. It seems I think what we would think is she comes out, if she sees the tire right away, what's she going to do? Maybe she's going to try to change it herself. I hope she had those kind of skills. Maybe not. But I think what is likely is she would go back inside, maybe call for help, or maybe call somebody and say, "Hey, I have a flat tire here. Can you come and help me out? Or I'm going to change it. I'm going to be late." She didn't do any of that. I think this is important. Not clear as to who made the deposit. This is something where, of course, it's too late now. But if I were to talk to somebody in her family or a friend or somebody that really knows the disappearance well, I would want to know more about this deposit. How many did she always make the deposit? Was it at the same time every night? The night that this all happened, did the deposit get made? Of course, they have it on video. They probably have that video now. There's probably a timestamp on it. It's old VHS tape. Hope the VHS tape still works. But was it right around the time that she usually made the deposit? Because if it is, then I have to be inclined to believe that it was she who made the deposit. Well, how did she get over there? Hard to say. Now, you should know a couple of guys were looked at for this. She did have a boyfriend at the time. His name it's public, so I can say it. His name is Joe Denton, Denton, not Denzel, but Denton, Deton. Of course, after the fact, people said, "Well, you kind of a little bit of a temper." Let me see if I can. There it is. Let me see what is written at the Charlie Project. Kelly was dating Chris Denton at the time of her disappearance. He reportedly had a hot temper, and police investigated him for possible involvement in the case, but found no evidence to implicate him. No wonder they were too busy going after the satanic cult. Chris died of cancer in 2004, and there were rumors he made a deathbed confession regarding her case, but the stories were untrue. Denton maintained his innocence until the end. I have to admit, I'm inclined to believe this. I can't see a reason why he would slash her tire, her car, or anything. It's hard for me to understand. Certainly, he could have picked her up and something went wrong, but I'm just not leaning really in that direction at all. But I'd certainly want to know, well, what were Kelly's plans for the rest of the night? Does anybody know? When was the last time she saw Chris? How did he find out that she was missing? Of course, he's dead now. But still, I have to admit, just reading it, of what I could learn in the last couple of days, Chris Denton, the boyfriend, to me, does not sound like a very good suspect. Of course, as facts change, theories change. Somebody else that was looked at was Joe David Henry. the owner of this video store, and he was the last person to see Kelly before she vanished. What that means, I don't know. Were the two of them there and she left? Or was she there did he leave and she was there by herself? I don't know. But he was the last person to see her. And Joe David Henry was arrested on child pornography charges in 2004. Authorities have emphasized that in spite of the nature of the charges against him, he has never been considered a serious suspect in Kelly's case. I think the same thing applies. Being that this whole investigation went off the rails with the satanic cult stuff and everything, I'm not sure we should believe anything about any of this investigation and anything that the police said about anything. I think that we have to look at this for ourselves. What we know about disappearances, what we've read about disappearances, in contrast to going anything by what the police said and did regarding this disappearance. It seems to me they just completely botched it. And even if after those 2 years of going off in the satanic cult angle and then coming back to sensibility where you're 2 years and so many months into it, and how could anybody take the police seriously after that, after the satanic cult investigation? It's like there was really, for Kelly's disappearance, really, it's like there was no investigation at all, I would say. Even though I know there was. I think we should just go forward from today thinking there wasn't any investigation. Yes, they did stuff, but what else do I have written here? My best insight on this, and really maybe nobody's surprised, it's kind of as along the same lines as Sue Swedell's, what I thought was Sue Swedell. Somebody who knew Sue Swedell caused her disappearance. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it was somebody she knew overtly well. It doesn't mean that it was a coworker or anything. But with Sue Swedell, it was certainly somebody who knew her well enough to know that she'd be getting out of work at a certain time and that at some point her car would break down and that person would be right there at the right time. And he knew that she would be inclined to choose to get in the car with him. Remember, the witness said she got in by herself. She was not coerced. She wasn't abducted. She wasn't thrown in. She wasn't dragged in. There wasn't any weapons. She talked to the guy and she voluntarily got in the car, never to be seen again. There was a description of the car, and still she is missing almost 40 years later. So with Kelly, I have to kind of think the same thing. That remember, her purse was in the car. So I guess she did make it out to her car. And those keys were thrown somewhere. And then we still have this slash tire. I'm going to throw out the belief that this Bibby kid did it at the time. Being that I have no confidence in the police at all regarding any of this, I'm going to completely throw out that confession. It very well could just be that this Bibby kid at the time, when he found out that he was just going to be a misdemeanor, he probably, all right, just what do I got to do to get out of here? Okay, I slashed the tire. Okay, can I go now? What's the fine? What do I got to do? Community service. Okay, I did it. Can I go now? I would not be surprised if that's what happened here. When he found out that it wasn't a felony and he wasn't going to have to do any jail time and they were going to let him off with whatever it ended up being, community service, a fine, some probation or something, he probably said, okay, I did it. So thus I have to believe that whoever slashed her tire is responsible for her disappearance. And what I would say is this is certainly somebody who knew Kelly, even though she might not have known him. I would have, if I were running this investigation back in 1992, and of course I would stay away from all the satanic stuff, I would have wanted to see, well, who were the customers? Of course, by this time, 1992, a lot of this would be on computer. even though it would be rudimentary computer files. I would be looking at customers who maybe I'd want to get Kelly's work schedule and find those customers who were only there on days when she was there. I'm inclined to believe that whoever did this was connected to Kelly through the video store. Somebody went in there to see her and rented a videotape or several videotapes, maybe didn't watch them all at all, but just to see her and to talk to her. Some guy who's maybe a little socially awkward or something like that. This is where my investigation would have gone in retrospect. And hello, Maureen. How are you doing tonight? Good to see you. Thanks for joining in. I know I'm about 15 minutes late on that, Maureen, but good to see you. But I said in retrospect, all these accounts of that type should have been checked. Automatic. Who only rented videos when Kelly worked? Also, seemingly, it was somebody who knew about the deposit. And so we might be open to the idea this is how well this person knew Kelly. He might have known, he might have been sitting out there at night, stalking. Sitting out there at night, she's getting off of work at 8:30, and every time he follows her, she goes and makes that deposit. And he's waiting out there. He goes out, slashes the tire, waits, she comes out. He comes by. She knows him because she knows him because he's a customer at the store. He just happens to come by. Hey, I have to make this deposit. Can you drive me over there? And something happens. And she figures, well, I'm going to be coming back in a couple minutes anyway. Then I can get this tire taken care of. I'll just leave my purse here. All I'm going to do is go dump it off. That's how the purse ends up in the car. And what happens, of course, the deposit is made either by the suspect, the person who caused her disappearance, or Kelly, and then something happens after that. But like I said, I think really had they, and obviously they looked at the owner, but I mean, that's what we know. Maybe they did take a look at customers, but given that they were so caught up in the satanic cult stuff, it seems unlikely. And then being that they were trying to, it's 2 years later and everything else. And who knows what's been done with the computer system in the meantime. Maybe it's been updated and you can't go back 2 years to see who was renting videos at the time. Who knows? Of course, today you could do that, but in 1992 terms, that's like almost like magic maybe back then. Maybe they kept paper records if the police really, really, really wanted to dig into this. But we know even in a regular disappearance type of situation, would they do something like this? Maybe they would. But this is what I think. I think this was some guy who became infatuated with Kelly. She's working at the video store. He comes up with this plan to, maybe it doesn't start out as end up being a murder, but he just wants to get to know her. He just wants to talk to her. And then they get in the car together and he starts creeping her out for whatever reason. And she wants to get out and he tries to grab her and something happens. And she says she's going to call the police. And that's all it takes. This is how quickly it can happen. My insight. It's still solvable. Of course, all those computer records and everything are gone, but in Gilmer, Texas, would there be anybody, of course, as the owner is a child, guy who's into child pornography, is he going to want to help? Is he even still alive? I don't know. Were there any other coworkers that might be able to help out on this? As somebody has said, Maureen, maybe it is a coworker. Well, I'd like to hear more about that. I think it's something certainly that needs to be examined. But then we also have to square, well, the owner said he was the last person to see her. He was there. She leaves the store. Maybe he's still at the store. She leaves, or he leaves and she's still at the store by herself. Then it's hard to imagine a coworker doing this, but maybe. Can't rule it out. Rockford. Hello, Rockford. Good to see you tonight. Now I remember this case. The slash tire confession jogged my memory. There's a documentary or show of some kind that covered the case. Apologies if you mentioned I did not. Didn't see it. Did not see it. Maybe I could look it up now to see if there were any conclusions that are close to mine regarding that. But just like last week with Tara Calico, where I came to the conclusion that, yeah, she had a boyfriend, but I think there could have probably been some other guy in her life that caused disappearance. I think this is also similar. Some guy in Kelly's life, although she didn't know that he was in her life, some guy in Kelly's life surely did this. Now, you may ask me, well, is it possible that Michael Bibby did this? He actually did slice the tire, but he also killed her? Possible. It seems possible. What I'd really want to know is, how did Michael Bibby or Bybee even get on their radar in the first place? It's unclear to me in the stuff that I read how he got on. Did he also get all wrapped up in this satanic cult stuff as well? Did they say, oh, you're in the satanic cult too? I don't know. So I'd want to know that. That might be helpful. And being that he was a teenager, she was, how old was she at the time? She was 17. So did they know each other? That would certainly make it more likely that this Bibby guy could have done it. I'd certainly want to hear if Kelly's parents ever suspected him. These are all interesting ideas. Did Michael ever express an infatuation or something with Kelly? Because, like I said, this sounds to me like somebody who was infatuated with Kelly and wanted to set up a way to meet her. Somebody who could not engage in conversation, communication, get close to her otherwise. This is why these things happen. If women don't know, this is how it works for guys. Now, I will say that guys, we're all adults here. I think most women know this. Guys will put themselves in positions to, by accident, run into women that they like. And most of it, of course, is completely innocent because they can't figure out any other way to put themselves in that position. But of course, slashing a woman's tire, her tire is going a little too far. On the other hand, if you know that a woman you like, for however you know it, goes to a certain coffee shop, a certain type of the time of day, and you just kind of end up there by accident, I think that as long as it's just very good natured and everything, I think that if a woman would find that out, I think many women, as long as the guy's good guy, not scary thing, I think a lot of women would find that to be cute. I think some women would be creeped out by that. All depends. But it just gives me the impression that this was done by some guy who couldn't figure out any other way to have some interaction with Kelly. And this is the way this person chose to do it, and things went wrong. I think the same thing with Sue Swedell. And for that, the big difference, once again, is there's a witness. She got into a car willingly with some guy. Just doesn't seem that she would do that with a stranger. Being that she was already on the phone, all she had to do was wait for somebody to come pick her up. That she got in the car with somebody tells me it was somebody that she knew, who she trusted. We don't know that to that extent with Kelly, but I'm thinking that's what went on. Rockford says, I believe the show left it wide open, but your theory seems most likely someone in her outer orbit. Yeah. Cranky, hello, Cranky. What's going on tonight? Greetings and salutations. Yeah, to you too. D, I would like to know if someone followed her or stalked her. Well, if so, it very well may be, but we just don't have that information. Is not out there. D, did she mention to her friends or family that she was being stalked? I'd certainly like to talk to some of Kelly's friends, what they thought at the time. All be very interesting to me. I'll try to put it on my list of things to do. We'll see if I can reach out. I don't know if any of her family is doing anything these days. I'll have to look up the show that Rockford's talking about. So, interesting one. This is also one of those disappearances that I think that if it were to be resolved, and of course, Kelly is found probably deceased, and there is a suspect who is caught, and we can put it all together. I think that we would be able to piece together a lot of other disappearances like this one, including Sue Swedell's. I think we would certainly have a much, much, much better understanding of disappearances like this. In addition, my perception is there have been disappearances like this that have been solved. In fact, maybe they didn't even end up being actual disappearances. They were actually murders. Woman is at work. Somebody's stalking her. Guy attacks her, takes her somewhere, kills her, leaves the body, and then it all gets resolved. And it's because this guy was stalking her, knew her, didn't know what to say to her, or she had blew him off, or whatever else. So that is where I am going with Kelly's disappearance. Once again, this is Kelly Dae Wilson, Gilmer, Texas, Gilmer. She went missing on January 5th of 1992. What also might stick out to me is if it was January 5th, this probably would have been at the end of Christmas break for school. You know, most schools, you know, you get off like a couple days before Christmas. And then, you know, that was always the great time of the year. You get like 2 weeks of school off. And then you go back, maybe depending on what day New Year's Day is on, you know, a few days after Christmas, maybe January 3rd, January 4th, January 5th. Maybe that has something to do with this disappearance, being that she was still in school at 17. So that's also something that might need to be examined. Maybe we'd go back. What did she do for New Year's? Who did she spend that with? She had this boyfriend. Was there anything else that went on? I'll put it on my list of things to do. Try to reach out somebody in her family, but I'm just not sure whether they do many appearances these days. I did find that there was a blog on Kelly's disappearance, but nothing has been added to it in quite a while, and I do not think that it was somebody who actually knew Kelly who was running that blog. Kelly Dae Wilson. You can look it up for yourselves. If you have a newspapers.com account, that might be something that will be very interesting to you because there were several articles written about her disappearance back in 1992. You can check that out. All right, let's move on to this. The missing dentist. This was something that was nationwide for a couple days. And I'm going to talk about it right now. Now, you should know when I was putting this together, I was under the impression that I would be talking about it tonight as still an unsolved disappearance. The fact is she has been found, and she has been found alive. So let's go through that. So what happened was the backstory. Her name is Melanie Nadler, Nadler, Litt. So it's like her maiden name, I guess, was Nadler, Nadler. Married name Litt, Litt. She is a dentist. She has her DDS, Dr. Melanie Nadler Litt. My understanding is her husband also a dentist. The backstory is this. Litt was reported missing Tuesday morning, so 6 days ago, the day after the last live show, after she failed to arrive for work at Family Dentistry at Seven Hills in Dallas, Texas. Friends said she had worked the previous day at another dental office on Villa Rica Way in Marietta, Texas. Coworkers contacted police once again when she did not show up on Tuesday, who conducted a welfare check at her Marietta home. Officers found her phone inside the house, but lit and her vehicle were missing. Friends said her car was later discovered abandoned behind a business off Barrett Parkway. How far that is from her house or where she worked, I have no idea. Also, as you would imagine, people were suspicious of her husband, but her husband was out of town seeing their son at college or something like that, whereas she stayed home in wherever the son was in college. The father needed to fly to get there. So it seemed that he had a pretty good alibi. So that was the story. So she goes missing sometime, I guess, Monday evening or Tuesday morning. She doesn't show up for work. Her car is, I guess, somewhat quickly found, abandoned, no damage or anything, but her phone is at the house. Of course, that's usually a bad sign. And she is missing. And I will add that, having seen her, I think she was 51. She didn't look 51. If you showed me a picture of her, at least the pictures that were posted, I would have said she was in her 30s or something. So an attractive dentist. She's looking younger than what her age says. Well, this disappearance got resolved yesterday, and there was a video that was posted that I'm just taking for granted is true, and it doesn't seem that Dr. Nadler-Litt was even actually technically hiding. The way I understand it, as of doing this live show at about 10:30 Eastern time on October 20th of 2025, she was just kind of walking around the neighborhood somewhere around that area with another guy. And somebody, it seems, who I guess knew about her disappearance, was just cruising around and happened to see her and called 911. And the police showed up. And so you can see the video of the local cops. You can see her with her very curly blonde hair. And there's a guy with her, big guy, big fella, bald, had shorts on, like a blue t-shirt. Let's just say he could have afforded to lose a couple pounds. And the amateur reporter, sleuth, or whoever you want to call it, is some distance away, but has his phone. And she's trying to cover her face with her hair. And then the guy with her turns to this guy and is yelling at him not to video or whatever else. The police are not paying. There's like 2 cop cars there, 2 police officers not paying attention to the person filming at all. They're talking to the 2 of them. And so it seems that she has been found safe, but she was with another guy. Now, you should know when this happened, a friend of the podcast, Jason Blair, from the Silver Linings Playbook podcast, did email me about it. Did I see this news? Did I see it? I told him, and I did give him a prediction that this seemed like a walk-off to me. And I guess I was kind of right. I didn't think that she was dead. I didn't think that her husband did it, even though if you go many places, including web sleuths, you will see people pointing a lot of fingers at the husband. It just seemed to me that the husband had a pretty good alibi. Yes, maybe it could have been a murder for hire, but those are overtly rare. And it just seemed to me that this was a walk-off. Although I don't think I could have known that she was running into the arms seemingly of another guy. And I'm just taking for granted that this was not like her brother or cousin or anything like that. But on Wednesday, or no, last Wednesday, she and her husband were supposed to be going on a vacation to Japan or something, and she disappeared 2 days before that. So what I told Jason is that, well, there's some things you have to keep in mind. First of all, dentists, when compared to the general population, have a much higher suicide rate. So we have to figure in that. We have to also figure the reason that is because being a dentist, although there is money to be made in it, can be stressful. And then you add in that they're planning to go on this trip. And although going on vacations is fun, that can have its own stressors. Of course, when you're a dentist, if you're not working, you're not getting paid. It's not like you get vacation days like if you're a teacher or something, working at a corporation or something like that. So there's that. And who else knows what was going on behind the scenes? I think what also sticks out to me is that the father went to see the son, but she didn't. She didn't take off a couple days to go see her son. What's up with that? Maybe this was a son from a previous marriage that the father, maybe it's not even her biological son. I don't know. Maybe that's the reason. But that stuck out to me in looking, doing my analysis. But I told Jason, so he can vouch for me in the emails, that this just seems like a walk-off to me. I was not thinking that somebody went over to her house and abducted her. I guess what we could say is that it seems that she had a guy on the side. Maybe. And what's weird is it seems that they were just walking around, and it didn't take much once it became public to track her down. Now, what actually went on here? What exactly was the plan on this? My guess, what exactly did, if now that we know she's alive, and we know, we can speculate on these things. My guess is that I have to believe that she's maybe had another guy in her life for a while. And that she really, really, really didn't want to go on this vacation with her husband for that very reason. And that probably the husband didn't know about this other guy. Was she hiding this? And maybe she just thought, well, I think this is pretty much it for me. I don't want to go on this vacation. I don't want to be with my husband anymore. There's another guy in my life who treats me better, and I want to do this and I want to do that. So I'm just, our son's in college. We have an empty nest. It's just the two of us. And so I'm going to go off with this other guy, and being that my husband's not around. And it very well may be that the plan was to come back, but they start talking. And, this other guy in her life starts sweet talking her and saying, well, you two are going to get divorced anyway. You don't have to go back. Well, I have to go to work tomorrow. No, you don't. You can stay with me. On and on and on and on and on. And this is how people talk themselves into doing stupid things. I think that's what happened. In addition, we don't know, that much about this woman. Seems everybody liked her. I think, of course, you can rate medical professionals these days. I think that she got decent ratings from all of her dentistry clients and everything else. But that doesn't mean we know her as a person, and that's really what counts when it comes to these disappearances. It very well could be that she was going through all sorts of crazy stuff. She might have mental health issues. Maybe she has an addiction. I have no idea. But, we should never be fooled by the public persona. If you're asking me, Well, when she went and met this guy, whenever she did, let's say Monday night, did she know that she was going to do this? I'm guessing not. I'm guessing this was all driven by the fact that she just wasn't going to be around. She didn't have the heart to tell her husband that I'm not going on this trip. I don't love you anymore. So instead, she was just going to make herself absent. I think. What is Lisa? My dad was a dentist. I think I knew that, Lisa. I think he brought that up before. And died of a heart attack at 61. It's a stressful career. I'm sure, right? Thank you for lending support to my idea there. Appreciate that, Lisa. Rockford might bolster your Trevelyan Evans theory, which I've given much more consideration since the episode. Yeah. You know, I realize I'm very self-aware when it comes to this, that I've never been married, don't have any kids, live by myself. I've had girlfriends, but I've never lived with any of them. And I really have nothing bad to say about them, at least publicly. You know, so I'm not an expert on relationships and everything like that, but I am an adult. And I just think that a lot of this stuff goes on. I know that, you know, of course, many of you are married, and I hope you're happily married, and I hope you're happily married for the rest of your lives. I'm very, very happy for you. But we also know that there are a lot of unique marriages out there, open marriages, swingers. You know, we're much more aware of all of this stuff these days. And, you know, of course, we know that there are just your regular couples out there who are now very open about it. That there are people who are married and the wife goes out and has sex with other guys, and the guy just says, yeah, go get it done, honey. I don't know. So maybe this was going on in the marriage. I have no idea. I guess what I'm saying is I just know that, you know, I'm very cynical about all this stuff. Very, very cynical. Cranky agree, Ed, being single is very stressful. Not the way I'm single, Cranky, but that's funny. Rockford also agree that in pending vacations can be a stress factor. This has been discussed a lot in the Brian Schaefer case. True. Sage, her husband posts that she's afraid of this guy, and so her husband posted that she's afraid of this guy, and he's controlling her. I don't know. You know, what's a husband gonna say? I don't know. Very well could be true, but they're just walking around there. He's controlling her so much that everybody, you know, this guy has to know that people are looking for her, and they're just like walking out there in public and get tracked down by just some person driving by. Maybe it doesn't appear to be that. And what's a husband to say? You know, I'm sure right now the main concern, other than their relationship, is their reputations as dentists. I mean, being that I got a lot of work done on my teeth a few years ago, and I certainly needed it. Am I going to be going to a dentist who has marriage problems? Nope. Am I going to be going to a dentist who, female or male or whoever, that ran away from their significant other? Nope. And so probably they're just maybe worrying about, are they going to be able to continue to be dentists? And so this is all damage control right now. And what better way to do that but to blame it on the other guy? No. I'm all ears and all eyes for what transpires from this. But my guess is this is probably going to get swept under the rug. my guess. This seems like it was a very private relationship issue that became a national issue, and probably only because, let's just admit it, she's a dentist, she's white, and she's attractive. Let's just admit it. If she's a minority and she's a teacher and other things, this probably does not make national news. Let's just admit it. Of course, I hate that. Sage, yeah, okay, good PI. Good point. Thank you. Well, Sage. Once again, I'm not saying anybody has to agree with me. If you think something different, totally fine. I'm just giving you my assessment. But keep in mind, I'm reading, not seeing anything different than all of you are. And in fact, maybe some of you have even followed this more closely than I have. But these are just some ideas that come to mind. When it comes to being in these kinds of professions, lawyers, doctors, accountants, things like that, and your name gets into the news and for whatever reason, you got to start worrying about your profession. Whereas if you're a truck driver, I'm just not sure it matters as much. Nothing against truck drivers. I have two brothers who were both truck drivers. Nothing against them. It's just different. So, but she's been found. She's alive. I don't know if this guy was controlling her or not. Well, what's the husband saying? So you knew about this guy controlling your wife? I mean, what's going on here? And this does make me think, if this is true, what the husband posted, then this does sound to me like they did have some sort of open marriage or something like that. Once again, I'm not here to judge. Cranky, successful lifestyles with triggered infidelity issues gets lots of public attention. Yeah, these, once again, I'm not telling people how to live their lives, but these open marriages and, honey, you just go do what you got to do, and it all works until it doesn't work. All right, moving on. I need to talk about this book, 2020 Vision. Now, let me get the book. Hold on a second. This is the paperback book. I got it a few weeks ago. I got the book used off of Amazon. I think it was like $5 or something like that. Now, the reason I got it is because some weeks ago, you might remember that I talked about the disappearance of Ray Griecar, of course, a lawyer who went missing a while ago in central Pennsylvania, near State College, Bellefonte, Pennsylvania, near where Brenda Condon went missing. And I forgot about that. But in the discussion at the time, I think somebody had brought up that there was something maybe in this book, 2020 Vision, that had something that could be construed to be similar to Ray Griecar's disappearance. I had not heard of this before, but it did seem fairly compelling and interesting to me. Well, that's interesting. I've never heard about that before. So I decided to check into it myself by finding the book. This book, I think, is now out of print. If you want to get it, I think you have to get a used one. As you can see, not that thick of a book. It is 228 pages. The type is pretty standard for a book this size. And so I completed it today. So what is my review of it? First of all, there is not one word in this book that I can see that is similar to Ray Griecar's disappearance at all. Zero. Not one word. My opinion, you can read it for yourself. There's nothing in the book there's nothing in the book, like if anybody knows Ray's disappearance. There's nothing about a car being abandoned anywhere. There's nothing about course, this book was written in 1990, so many years before Ray's disappearance. I think there might have been a thought out there that Ray knew about this book and fashioned his disappearance after something in this book. I just don't think that's possible. There's no lawyer's characters in this book. There's no abandoned cars. There's no missing computers. There's no computer that's destroyed in a creek. The actual mystery in this book at the beginning is not a disappearance at all, but an actual murder where the body is left behind. So there's just nothing in there that I can see that, real life imitating art. Nothing. Instead, as I've already stated, as I was reading the book, I think I brought this up last week. The book, the murder in it, is certainly ripped off from the 1969 murder of Betsy Aardsma on the campus of Penn State University, a murder that is still unsolved, by the way. That woman, Betsy Aardsma, was murdered in the library on the campus of Penn State University. The murder and I'm not going to give it away. I'm not going to ruin it. There's no spoilers here. But I will tell you that the murder that is the central point of this book is on a school campus, but it takes place in a music room. But the woman is murdered in a very, very similar way to the way Betsy Aardsma was murdered in real life at Penn State. The author obviously used that as a template for this book. Now, what is the book about? Well, the way what I would say is it is a time traveling murder mystery that starts in so the book itself was written in 1990. The murder happens in 1995. And then in the future, through technology and all stuff like that, a police officer is sent into the past, not like Marty McFly going back into the past, like I mentioned with the DeLorean, but his conscience or his psyche or something is beamed back into his self at the time. That's as best as I can do. There's a lot of technobabble in this book, but that's it. And so they work this out. Can this guy go into the past using this kind of technology to make sure that this woman isn't murdered? The book is not good, just to be honest with you. Now, you may be saying, well, what was the reason? Well, this author, Pamela West, would have picked that particular murder out. Well, as I read here, she's originally from St. Louis, but she ended up living for 14 years in central Pennsylvania, in a college town where she helped raise her two children and edited dissertations for the university. High school reunion in 1985 took her to Washington, D.C. As a result, she's now married to her former high school sweetheart and resides in Northern Virginia. So for a while, she lived in central Pennsylvania. So that is the reason she used Betsy Aardsma's murder as the template for this book. I found out this is the third book that she's written. And it's by a well-known publisher, Ballantine Books, not some fly-by-night. She didn't self-publish. But I'm here to give you a review. If it was like on Amazon, what would be a perfect score? 5-star. I'd give this book maybe 2. It's not that good of a mystery. The resolution is not that compelling. It's not Agatha Christie. This book is only 228 pages, but it could have been like 30 pages shorter. A lot of stuff how this was published at a well-known publisher is beyond me. This book needed edited. Somebody needed to tell this woman, I don't mind the premise of your book and everything, but you actually need to put more stuff in it, more plot points, less exposition and talking about stuff between characters that has nothing to do with anything. And you need to have a subplot and things like that. And as a guy who's written many novels, easier for me to talk. I've never had mine published by a real actual publishing business, but I know a good writer when I read one. In fact, to be a good writer, you have to be able to read other people's writing and know whether it's good or not. This is not good. It's just not. But the reason I read it was to see if it had anything to do with Ray Graker's murder. Has nothing, or his disappearance has nothing to do with it. It very well may be that Ray read this book because it took place in central Pennsylvania, or the murder in real life took place in central Pennsylvania, and that's where Ray's from. It very well could be that Ray Graker read this book before he went missing. But there's surely nothing that he read in this book that led to him going missing. Zero. Rockford, thanks for the review. You saved us some time. Did a main character in the book disappear? No. There is a murder at the beginning, and the rest of it is all about trying to figure out who murdered this woman. Now, you should know in real life, a professor at Penn State was suspected. He was never charged with anything. That's all I'm going to say. Once again, I'm not going to ruin it for anybody who might. I know what I've said about the book, and it's nothing flattering, but I do realize somebody may still want to read it. I don't want to do that. I don't want to ruin all of that and what the resolution is and everything else. I don't want to do that. It's enough that I called the book bad. That's the professional thing to do. So I'm not going to ruin and give any spoilers or anything. Are you telling me I could write something better? D, perfectly willing to help you write a really good novel if that's what you want to do. Rockford, some sources say Graker consulted on the book. Others say he borrowed a copy of it. The author has been quoted promoting the idea of a connection. Yeah, there's no connection. That's all marketing. Maybe she had to do that because the book didn't sell very well at the time. I don't know. But it certainly has something to do with the unsolved murder of Betsy Ardsma. But for Ray Graker, not so. Not so at all. Like I said, he might have read it, but there's nothing in here that has anything that could say, oh, he read this, so he went missing. Oh, he took this from the book, and this is how he planned out his disappearance. Nothing. Zero. I'm going to keep saying it. 0, 0, 0. But it is Pamela West's book, 2020 Vision. And the reason it's called 2020 Vision is because they're in the future looking back in the past, and they're trying to correct things from the past, but in a little different way than, like I said, with the Back to the Future and movies like that, where the actual physical people go to the past. All right, so we got 2 minutes, so that I'm not going to get to the Louvre heist. Not going to get to that. So what are we doing this Friday? I'm doing this interview tomorrow morning. I'm going to have to probably do it downstairs because my condo is going to be too loud. There's going to be too much noise in the background to do the construction. But I am interviewing a police officer tomorrow, if you can believe it. We are going to be discussing the disappearance of William Charles Jones Sr. And let me make sure I get the date correct. But it happened in Milford, Ohio. And he went by the name Chuck, by the way. William Charles Jones. He went missing on January 31st. At least that's when people recognized that he was missing. It took a little while. January 31st, 2009 from Milford, Ohio. A police officer, I wouldn't necessarily say he's an investigator. He's an officer investigator that's assisting Milford police all these years later. His name is Jeff Hagee, Hagy. And William Charles Jones went out for dinner. He was living in an assisted facility, even though he's only in his late 40s, like assisted living facility. He had some issues. He went out to eat with his brother and his brother's wife. And they had gotten him a birthday present, dropped him back off at the facility. Nobody really noticed that he was missing for like a week, but when they did check his private place in this complex, his wallet was there, the present was there, his room or little place was very neat, but William Charles Jones was never seen again. And so we're almost 17 years later. Milford police still trying to figure it out, and I am here to assist. So you can look that up. It is on the Charlie Project. He is on NamUs, William Charles Jones. And in preparation for this interview with Jeff tomorrow, I have spoken to William's son. I've spoken to William's sister. And I spoke to somebody else, but we're going to keep that off the record. I told this person that she would not be mentioned, and so she will not be mentioned in the episode. But she was also able to give me a really good idea of William Charles Jones as well. So that's it. Ran over a minute tonight, but got a lot packed into here tonight. Some disappearances. Also talked about a book. You get it all here at the live show. Before you go, please give a thumbs up to the show tonight. Subscribe to this channel. Support Unfound any way that you can. Patreon, PayPal, YouTube, whatever you got to do. And that's all I have for tonight. Keep your heads on swivels out there. Do not become a victim. Do not end up on my podcast. Yeah, Charles, catch you next week. Yeah, say hi to your sons for me. Good night.